Okay, so we're going to go through how to proofread your paper. I'm going to show you all the things you need to be checking for in addition to your spelling, capitalization, and proper grammar. You're going to need to number a line sheet of paper from 1 to 18. I know it says 17 here. I added an extra thing, so you need to number from 1 to 18. Does your paper have proper MLA formatting? Your paper needs to be double-spaced with 1-inch margins, using blue or black ink. Papers should not be centered. It should be justified left. I set up your document in Google Classroom like this. If you change my formatting, it will not be like this. So if your paper is not formatted correctly, put an X for number 1. If your paper is formatted correctly, put a smiley face for number 1. Does your paper have a proper MLA heading? Your name, my name, class and period, and the date. If it does not have a proper MLA heading, put an X for number 2. If it does have an proper MLA heading, put a smiley face next to number 2. Does your essay have a title? If your essay does not have a title, put an X for number 3. If your essay does have a title, put a smiley face for number 3. Is your title formatted correctly? Your title should be upper and lower case with no special formatting, no bold, no underline, no italics. And it must be in blue or black ink or typed. You are typing it. If your title is not formatted correctly, put a red X by your number 3. If it is formatted correctly, put a smiley face by number 3. Are your paragraphs indented? All paragraphs must start a tab or 5 spaces in. A tab is preferred. If your paragraph is not indented, put a red X next to number 5 for each paragraph that is not indented. If your paragraph is indented, put a smiley face next to number 5 for each paragraph that is indented. Is there a hook at the beginning of your introduction? Does your introduction start with a question, quote, or interesting fact? If not, put a red X next to number 6. If it does, put a smiley face next to number 6. Is there a thesis at the end of your introduction? Is the last sentence of your introduction your thesis statement? If it's not, it should be. If your thesis statement is not at the end of your introduction, put a red X next to number 7. If yes, put a smiley face next to number 7. Do you have a topic sentence for each paragraph? Does the first sentence of your paragraph summarize what the whole paragraph is going to be about? If not, put a red X next to number 8 for each paragraph that doesn't have a topic sentence. If yes, put a smiley face next to number 8 for each paragraph that does have a topic sentence. Are there 3 pieces of evidence for paragraph 1? Evidence only counts if it is properly cited. You must use quotations and you must have a citation after the quotation marks. If it does not meet both of these requirements, you do not have evidence. There's no evidence if it does not meet these requirements. If you do not have 3 pieces of evidence, put a red X next to number 9 for each piece of evidence that is missing. If you do have evidence, put a smiley face next to number 9 for each piece of evidence you have. Is there an argument for each piece of evidence? If there is a piece of evidence, is there a sentence immediately following the evidence that explains what the evidence means? If no, put a red X next to number 10 for each argument you are missing. If yes, put a smiley face next to number 10 for each argument you have. Are there correct citations for each piece of evidence? Is your evidence cited correctly? If you're using a direct quote, you should have an evidence sentence starter, then a comma, then a space, open the quotation marks, insert your quote, comma, close your quote, space, open parentheses, author's last name, close parentheses, period. If you are paraphrasing, you just need a sentence. and then the author's last name in parentheses at the end of the sentence. If your evidence is not cited correctly for your paragraph 1, put a red X next to number 11 for each citation you are missing. If your evidence is cited correctly, put a smiley face next to number 11 for each citation you have. Are there 3 pieces of evidence for paragraph number 2? Evidence only counts if it is properly cited. You must use quotations. You must have a citation after the quotation marks. If it does not meet both of these requirements, you do not have evidence. Put a red X next to number 12 for each piece of evidence that is missing. If you put a smiley face next to number 12 for each piece of evidence you have. Is there an argument for each piece of evidence? If there is a piece of evidence, is there a sentence immediately following the evidence that explains what the evidence means? If your evidence is not cited properly, you do not have evidence and cannot have an argument for your evidence. So if you do not have an argument, put a red X next to number 13 for each argument you are missing. If you do have an argument, put a smiley face next to number 13 for each argument you have. Are there correct citations for each piece of evidence? Is your evidence cited correctly? Do you have an evidence sentence for a direct quote? Do you have an evidence sentence starter, comma, space, quotation marks, your quote, comma, close your quote, open parentheses, author's last name, close parentheses, period. If you're paraphrasing, do you have your sentence and then the author's last name in parentheses followed by a period? If no, put a red X next to number 14 for each citation you are missing. If yes, put a smiley face next to number 14 for each citation you have. Is there a concluding paragraph? The concluding paragraph should summarize the main point of the essay and leave the reader with the lasting impression. If no, put a red X next to number 15. If yes, put a smiley face next to number 15. Are there any personal pronouns? Me, my, I, you, your. Personal pronouns cannot be used in formal writing under any circumstances. Your name is in the heading. I know these are your ideas. If you use a personal pronoun, your letter grade will be dropped by 1 full letter grade. If you have a personal pronoun, put a red X next to number 16 for every personal pronoun you use. If you don't have any personal pronouns, put a red smiley face next to number 16. Are there any contractions? Contractions such as don't, couldn't, wasn't, cannot be used in formal writing. They must be written out as follows. Do not, could not, was not. These are not the only words that cannot be used in contraction form. No contractions are allowed under any circumstances. You will lose 1 point for every contraction you use. Put a red X next to number 17 for each contraction you use. Put a red smiley next to number 17 if you do not use any contractions. Are there any non-descriptive words? Non-descriptive words are words that leave the reader asking questions such as, who is they? What is it? What does the writer mean by what? Circle any non-descriptive words, or note them in your essay. Put a red X next to number 18 for each non-descriptive word you have. Put a red smiley next to number 18 if you have no non-descriptive words. You will lose 1 point for every non-descriptive word you use. Time for some math. The top of your line sheet of paper, create a spot for total X's and total smiley faces. Count up the total number of X's you have on your paper, and write the number at the top next to the X. Count the total number of smiley faces you have on your paper, and write the number at the top next to the smiley face. If you got an X for incorrect MLA formatting, number 1, you cannot turn in your paper. If you got an X next to your heading for improper MLA heading, number 2, you cannot turn in your paper. If you got an X next to your title because you either don't have one or it is formatted incorrectly, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have an X for number 11 or number 14, even just one X, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have any personal pronouns or an X for number 16, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have any contractions or an X for number 17, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have any non-descriptive language or an X for number 18, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have 5 or less smiley faces, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have between 6 to 10 smiley faces, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have between 11 and 17 smiley faces, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have 18 to 22 smiley faces, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have 23 to 29 smiley faces, you cannot turn in your paper. If you have 29 to 33 smiley faces, and you were not disqualified earlier, congratulations, you can submit your paper. So what now, Miss Smith? Well, great question. All the red X's on your paper, or the red X's next to those numbers, are things that need to be corrected. So go back and correct those items, and then submit your paper in Google Classroom. Once everything is corrected, go to Google Classroom, go to your essay, and leave me a comment with how many smiley faces you got when you did your proofreading. Make sure you proofread for spelling, capitalization, and using punctuation to identify the end of a sentence. If you have any questions, please email me.